Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO in the Milo Bale Student Center. If you happen to hear the rhythmic sound of drums in the next half hour, and they're just starting up now, it is the Intertribal Student Council's second annual Earth Day powwow going on upstairs here at the Student Center. This is a living, breathing student center, and so Senator Pam Brown, who's with us today, we're just going to have to be a little more assertive in our speech, at least volume-wise, and you're used to that down in Lincoln. You have to be heard above the crowd, is that correct?
We don't have powwows, but close to it.
Well, you have all kinds of lobbyists on the side. Senator Brown is with us today, and the main thing we're going to talk about is city-county merger. But the thing that's sort of unique about how we're going to start out is a very unique kind of survey that was just tabulated.
Yes. The League of Municipalities and the Nebraska Association of County Officials worked together to conduct this survey. It's the first of its kind using this technology over the internet to find out how people are feeling about a subject, and it's more than just how they're feeling. It really digs down into why. There's an online focus group that really gets to the bottom of why they're feeling the way they do. Because the subject of merger and consolidation is so fraught with emotion, it seems to be that we really felt that we needed more information about how to proceed on the topic.
Well, going back a little so we get sort of bring people up to speed, I mean, for years, I've heard, particularly with Omaha and Douglas County and Lincoln and Lancaster County, the talk of a city-county merger. And some small services have been merged within both those entities.
Actually, quite a few through interlocal agreements.
Right. And then there's some that are more than one county involved. And
right.
Law enforcement does a lot of merging. And in fact, recently the 911 emergency service in Omaha
right.
was put together because they had to buy a lot of new equipment, and it only made sense. But they've been talking about it for years in terms of efficiency, and you know, wouldn't it be better for people to know there's one law enforcement agency and so on. However, every time that it gets down to talking about it, there are all kinds of things that come up.
When you get to the specifics,
right.
it becomes very...
But the voters did say, what, about 16 months ago?
Yes.
They voted on one of your resolutions.
Yes, a constitutional amendment to allow for it. And then the legislature needs to put in place statutory language about how to go about doing that. And that's where the rubber sort of hits the road, and then it will hit the road even more so if we ever get to the point where two localities are actually talking about the specifics of how to do it. My perspective has always been that in order for it to be successful, it must be as locally driven as possible. There must be a mechanism that allows for citizens to really reinvent their government. And that's a very different approach than for us from Lincoln being very specific about how it's going to be. Because I think that it will probably be different in any different
locality.
Yes.
Even though there would be a framework that
yes.
they would probably have to
yes.
follow. Okay,
yes.
You are representing District 6 here in Omaha, and do you favor, you obviously have some favorable feel for the ability to merger, or you wouldn't
Absolutely.
be involved in this?
Absolutely. I think it needs to be explored.
Right.
I think that we are, so much of our local government structure is based on how it was 100 years ago, and I just think that we have to keep looking at different ways of doing services, especially when we have things like the internet now,
right.
methods of communication that we didn't have before.
Well, the thing that always struck me as odd is that, and I mean, if I lived in Ralston, I'd probably feel differently, or Bennington, but Omaha is growing, and it will at some point encompass most of Douglas County, like it or not, with the exception of some pockets. And it always seemed funny to me that we have a Douglas County board that talks about certain things, the city council, the mayor, and then they're different districts representing, you know, different groups of people that don't overlap. So you can't get one, you know, if you go into somebody, you can't necessarily have the clout as a citizen of having one person, again to use your phrase, where the rubber hits the road.
I was talking to a group that did a joint library, and they were just talking about the number of different entities that they had to get approval from, and it was just mind-boggling how difficult it is to really institute some shared services, just because there are so many different layers of government that
But
you
we're
have to go
working
through.
around the issue all the time in terms of,
Right.
you talk about the library, I think, was that the one in Papillion?
La Vista.
La Vista?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but it did take a long time for them to cross the T's and dot the
Right,
I's.
right.
What are the,
And the other issue is that Nebraska has more governmental subdivisions per person than all but 46 other states. I mean,
well, we heard that over and over again with school consolidation. I mean, we just had 1 billion little school districts, and I'm afraid people are confusing some of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And the survey
Yes.
showed you
yes.
got a
Because
lot of
the
that from
emotional
answers.
attachment, especially in rural areas, is to the school. And so the fear comes that if there is city-county or county-county consolidation, that it's going to impact the identity of that community, which is generally related to the schools. But so many places have found that a community might buy snow removal equipment, and the community but 5 miles away buys the same snow removal equipment. They could share that snow removal equipment if they were communicating and save a whole lot of money.
Or make buys together,
Yes.
or all kinds of things.
Right.
Well, okay, let's get down to this. DiscoverWhy.com was the
Is a company out of Bedford, Massachusetts that does this kind of research. They started out as a traditional research company, and then working with Level 3, they migrated the technology to the internet. And they do it for colleges and universities on retention. They do it ad testing for businesses. They do a lot of political work. But this is the first time that they've used that technology in a civic engagement kind of sense. And it presented lots of different opportunities, but lots of different challenges too.
Well, let's see. As I recall, about 800 people logged on, and of those 800, because it involves some time.
About
go through the
25
survey.
minutes.
Yeah, and so about 200 plus of those 800 actually got into the nitty-gritty
Right.
of answering the questions.
Well, everybody answered the questions, the pre-questions.
But there was a
but there
video
was a
kind of
video that served as a stimulus, that had some local elected officials and state officials talking about what the options might be, and then staying on and answering questions after that. So yes.
Okay, so well, what did you come up with? What was the most amazing finding to you? There's lots of ways to use
Well,
these numbers demographically and
yes.
so on.
It was almost evenly split, pro and con. And the difficulty, I think, at least from my perspective, is that what I wanted to know was how they wanted us to frame the legislation. But they were more interested in how it would look for them or what it would do to them locally. But even the people who most strongly favored it or most strongly were concerned about it felt that they were operating on not enough information. They wanted more information. They wanted their elected officials to talk about what it would look like, how it would impact them. Could they save money? If so, how? They really wanted a lot more conversation.
So that means they're at least open to learning more, and which is a good sign.
Absolutely, and it shows that developmentally we're still in the infancy in terms of this discussion, and that as elected officials we need to talk about it a lot more amongst ourselves and with people.
It was no surprise that there was a rural-urban difference on whether they favored it.
To a certain extent, but I think that I was a little surprised that urban people. I mean, I think that there are urban people who have some of the same identity issues that that the rural people talked about.
So so what was it, about 50-50, or did the rural people fear it more?
No, they feared it more.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing was that older voters tended to be more positive than younger voters.
That was the funny thing to me, because the 18 to 35 group,
who you would think are more open to
change,
yes.
man, you know, change is us. We are the changing generation. Mr. Flexible, Mrs. Flexible.
It didn't seem to play out that way, and I don't know if maybe it has to do with the demographics of the people who are older, who are internet users. I mean, although we did a lot to do outreach to people who are not traditional internet users, tried to encourage people took ads out and tried to encourage them to go to their libraries and things like that. But I still think you probably get people who are a little less resistant to change, who are
or who have lived through some of what they maybe feel is the bureaucratic nonsense.
Exactly.
I mean,
the proliferation of government.
You know, and they have, there's maybe even, I mean, even Ed Jaksha is online, you know, I mean.
Oh,
and
he called up and was just thrilled about this.
The state's biggest tax, what would you call him?
Watchdog.
Tax watchdog. But what I'm saying is that many of those people may have seen or felt that there must be some inefficiencies, just logically,
or had experience with that.
That's probably likely, given the fact that their experience with government is more than just you know, watching the fire trucks go by or the police cars whiz by.
And maybe they have more of a sensitivity to the relationship between government and taxation, whereas younger people who haven't had quite the length of experience between those
or
things.
haven't owned a home, perhaps, or something like that.
And the younger people tended to focus more on whether it would change their services, their ability to access services.
Well, it still shows that people are interested in how government is formed, and that they at least acknowledge, by the number of people that were more favorable, that government is evolutionary and should. I mean, it seemed like it's been static for so long that this world has certainly changed.
Absolutely. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that all the people that stayed on at the end to complete an open-ended question about whether they liked the process as a way to engage them, and that it was uniformly positive, and they wanted it done on all kinds of different topics, gambling. And
oh, really?
Yes, they really felt positive about this method of engaging in.
Well, Ross Perot wasn't all wrong, was he? I mean, he really felt that ultimately we would be able to communicate how we felt via the computer.
But what I as an elected official, I don't want it to go to the point where representational government
becomes a referendum.
Yes, exactly.
Everything is a referendum.
Because I don't know that I have great faith in people's ability to understand issues, but the context of what we do in the legislature sometimes gets lost in the translation.
But if they were engaged in that way and did stick through any kind of survey or on a bill and did put their comments on,
yes,
then you would know if it's just somebody filling out one of those sort of electronic postcards.
Exactly.
Or, you know, that's been told to vote a certain way, or someone that has given it some more thought. So, but I understand the fear. I mean, they use World Herald polls and everything, and if those polls happen to favor your position, I'm sure some of your constituents wave them in your face, so to speak.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that things are necessarily, I mean, you have to vote your conscience,
right.
Given the tons of information you get. I may not always like how you vote.
Absolutely.
But, and I can get rid of you or help get rid of you if I don't.
Yes.
But if you start being a piece of clay that's molded to every internet survey or any kind of survey, then we have some serious problems.
One of the things about this is that it's not just the survey, it is the focus group where people come back and talk about why all of the technology is patented, and they can pull out in real time although this took place over a period of about a week and a half. But they can do this in real time, pull out what people feel most strongly positively about, or the most strongly negative, and then a focus group comes back and talks about it, and everybody that's online responds to what the focus group is saying. So you get quantitative data about qualitative discussion, and so it's really an interesting. You get much deeper into issues.
Not just what people think, but their fears, their.
But the why they think that. If somebody comes on and in the focus group and says, well, the reason that I voted was some outlandish thing, and everybody responds by
saying, wait a minute.
Yeah, negatively, then you know, no, that wasn't really the issue.
It becomes less valid.
Yes.
In terms of a survey. Well, so what happens next with the issue of merger?
Well, we did not take it up in the legislature.
Well, you had a few other things, and it was a short session.
But unfortunately, I think that's sort of going back on our word to the people. I mean, when you put out a constitutional amendment and they vote in favor of it, then I think we have an obligation to respond fairly quickly, at least to give them the option. Mm-hmm. One of the things I felt strongly about in terms of the construction of the enabling legislation is that that the people, if the elected representatives did not choose to pursue merger and consolidation, if the people wanted to do it through an initiative, that they could do that. And what was being proposed included an initiative process for to start up the merger talks. The other part that it included was a convention of appointed citizens that would then draw up the new form of government, and that would be proposed to the
kind of like
to
a
the
little
voters.
Constitutional convention.
Exactly.
Well, but what do you think will happen, practically speaking? Will there be? There've been a few ideas bandied about legislatively. Will something?
I
make committee next
I think
year?
next year that I think that this, and I think there will just be a lot of pressure from the citizenry to hear more about it. That was the piece that I thought came out very clearly in the survey. They want to hear more about it. They want to be a part of it. I don't think we can.
Do they want to go forward in some measure? I don't mean to actually do it.
Yeah, I don't know that we know that yet, and that's why this data is going to be very helpful to the League of Municipalities and to NACO, to locally elected officials as they talk about what it might look like. But from our perspective, I think we have to move forward on giving the localities this option.
Okay, realistically speaking now, do you, in your lifetime, will you see, let's say, Omaha and Douglas County merge, or Lincoln and Lancaster
I don't
County?
know about Omaha Douglas County. I think Lincoln Lancaster is a possibility. I think that there's some other possibilities in the
For
state.
instance?
The South Sioux City area has done a lot of work together. Gearing Scotts Bluff.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to get you in any trouble, but just, and you said county to county.
Kearney has done a lot of work within Buffalo County. They've sort of maxed out on what they can do with interlocal agreements. I mean, they've really kind of feel like they've hit as much as they can do in terms of shared services, and they really need to get beyond shared services into some sort of a more cohesive structure for delivering these services jointly.
What about Omaha and Douglas County? What is it that makes you think that is not as doable?
Well, maybe it's because I live here, and so I see the
politics?
Yes, the politics of it.
The fiefdoms?
That I don't see as clearly. I just see the possibilities in other places because there's so much that has been done in terms of joint delivery of services. I don't think that we are quite in the same position. Now, the county and the city got together and built the joint city-county building. I think that there's, you mentioned 911, there are some things, but I don't think we're as far down the road as some other places that I've seen in terms of really working to do much of their services
Well, is that
jointly.
okay? In other places where they are farther down the road, does it have to do with political will, or does it have to do more with pragmatic
Both.
reasons?
Both.
Well, where
But
does
I
the
think-
political will come from in other places, whether they be here in Nebraska or elsewhere? What kind of thing spurs that political will? You know, when they realize, you know, this is silly not to do, or at least to do as much as we can, whether we're merging or just doing things together. Do they wake up one day, or is it?
I think it's different everywhere. I mean, I've looked at some of the places nationally where it's worked. Sometimes it is one person, one political leader who has a vision and can really engage other people. Sometimes it is a lot of leaders without any one person who can work together, who just sort of teamwork is natural to them. Some of it has to do with political history. I can't put my finger on it. I just know that Lincoln Lancaster over a period of years has really done a lot of things to move towards shared
I think their
services.
health department.
Yes, yes.
You're down there more.
I'm trying to think because I've heard the number of
Is it because Lincoln really mirrors Lancaster County? Are there no other big cities there, or are they just small? I mean,
well, Waverly is there,
Right.
and
how do the Waverlyarians
well,
view those kinds of things?
Ron Melby, who's the mayor of Waverly, was one of the people that was on the panel that formed the focus group for the, I mean, not the focus group, but the stimulus group for the survey. And he talked about, you know, the positives in terms of maybe being able to hold down costs, but also the concerns that people had. Well, right now, I know who to call if I have a pothole in the street in front of my house. Will I know who to call? I mean, it's a very kind of personal thing when you get down to the brass tacks of it. And so I'm sure that there is a fear on the part of communities. But
And the survey showed that they felt that if they were in a minority group, and I don't mean like ethnic minority
Right.
necessarily, but if they were in a minority position, i.e. Waverly in terms of Lincoln, that they would not be heard.
Well, and any of the legislation that I've heard talked about has an opt-out provision. So if a city, a smaller city, did not want to participate, they could vote. You know, their vote would opt them out.
Well, you back this concept at least. Would you, getting this at least to the next on the floor, if you come up with what a resolution you feel you believe in, would you be willing to put your stamp of priority on a bill like this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, if you can't stand behind.
No, this is something that I have had bills about merger even before the constitutional amendment passed. This is something that I just feel citizens need to have this option. We are in a new century, and it's time for them to be able to figure out how they want to reinvent government for it to be more responsive to them. And if they think that it's already as responsive as it needs to be, then nothing will change. But if they don't, then we better make sure that they have a mechanism to make that change.
So it's just about options.
Yes.
In your mind.
Yes.
Is giving people options.
At least from the perspective as a state senator. Now, as a citizen, I may have a different perspective, and I may be pushing my locally elected officials to look at this as a way to manage the costs. But as a state senator, my goal is to give local citizens, local elected officials, every tool that they have, and part of it's related to us having put in place levy limits and lids, so that localities can't just spend whatever they want to, and so they need to look at ways to be able to control their costs.
The realities of high taxes in this state, I'm not saying higher than they should be, I'm just saying We have only 3 sources of real tax revenue. The
Yes.
whole, you've
Yes.
you've heard the whole deal
Oh,
before.
yes.
So the reality of that may have just as much of effect in terms of the lids, because people wanted those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
constraints, may have just as much of effect as, say, just be a nice thing if we could all work together, or it's more efficient.
Right.
It could well, in the end, be more economically driven.
It could be.
It may not start that way,
It
but
could be. But there are some questions. Some of the places that have had merger can't really point to huge cost savings. Some can, some can't. I think that most can point to more efficient services, but maybe not necessarily cost savings. So that's a question that we're going to have to solve together.
or that the growth that they would experience before the cap, that they realize is not workable in terms of dollars and cents with the cap, that they can still grow by working together. So budgets may not necessarily go down, because they're going to have to
Right.
increase or maintain services as
Right.
they are. One interesting thing is that the rural folks, some of the things they mentioned was the loss of jobs. Now, in some areas, a few jobs lost
Oh,
is
it's
a huge thing.
Well, and if you look at some of the research, the Tax Research Council has done work about whether it would save money. And in those places where it would save the most money are the places where there's the least population, where you're talking about really achieving economies of scale by merging two fairly...
Because they have so few.
Yes. And in those places, some of the government jobs are some of the more stable and highly paid jobs in the communities.
And they're really hurting right now.
Yes.
Okay, what are we going to hear more about this next session? You suggested maybe we will, but make a prediction. We have about a minute. Predict what's going to happen in the next year on this.
Oh, yeah. In the next year, we will use the information that's come from the survey, and we will move forward with some sort of enabling legislation that will allow localities to proceed with discussions about merger and consolidation.
And quickly, if people were listening to this and they want more information that you believe they want based on this survey, how would they find out more about city, county, or any kind of government merger?
They can contact my office. My phone number is 471-2714, and I think that they should talk to their local elected officials and just find out where they are.
Good idea. Find out where they are in the whole thing.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Senator Pam Brown. Thanks for coming to the powwow. I think they've taken a break upstairs. Thanks for joining us on Consider This.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.